Hello everyone, and welcome back to, fixing the gyms. This time we're going to be going with Black and White 2, fixing UNOVA's gyms. Celebrate, hopefully the Black and White 2 remakes come out, Black and White remakes before those come out. Just taking a look at the older games and seeing how we can improve them. They've got some good Pokemon, but at Gym 7, still some questionable move choices, looking at what Drayden's got here. And early game, some duplicate Pokemon lines, when there's clearly other better Pokemon available already at that point. They're clearly better than a lot of the older games, but not the best, and we're here to fix that. So, let's line up the gym leaders of UNOVA, and let's get to work on making them just a little bit better. For our guidelines for this, we're going to make them harder but not absurd. The previous one we did for Kalos was a bit too excessive, so we're dialing that back a little bit. They are still going to be able to learn moves and evolve earlier than normal. They're going to have full access to Move Tutor, Egg moves, hidden abilities, and all level up moves. Levels are going to be slightly boosted. The entire original evolutionary lines that they were using will be retained, and we will play by Generation 6's mechanics, so no Generation 6 moves or mechanics, so no Z moves, no Megas, no Dynamaxing, no Terastallizing, no abilities that came out later, which there's definitely a bunch of Pokemon that could have benefited from this a lot. So when we get around to the optimal teams, the best teams, we'll be doing that. But before we get working on to everything else, please don't forget to leave a like and subscribe for more. We do all kinds of stuff on this channel. Got a lot of big projects planning going forward, and you guys are the ones that keep all that stuff going, so share it out to your friends. So, out with the old, let's bring in the new, fixing UNOVA's gym leaders. Starting off with Cheren and his normal type gyms, Patrapped. Still going to be keeping that. We're going to give it the analytic hidden ability, giving it Crunch, Workup, Super Fang, and Return. This is because Workup gives a boost to, stats as well as he gives the team. For Workup, Super Fang will always cut HP in half of what it currently is, allowing it to do some pretty strong damage. And Return is just in general a very strong move used by normal types. Crunch is there for hitting ghost types. Really not much to say. Also helps get around Pokemon that are fast, then his analytic does more damage to Pokemon that move before you. Giving him a Herdier this time. Intimidate, just in general a fantastic ability. Thunder Wave, Work Up, Aerial Ace to hit those fighting types you may want to use against it. And once again, Return, just a generally very good move. Remember at this time, Clefairy was still a normal type, so it is given Stored Power, Work Up, Flamethrower, and Drain Punch with the Magic Guard ability. So, status will not really affect it too much. It's actually out immune to paralysis in this game, because this was a point where that actually would never proc the paralysis. And it doesn't have any normal type moves, but this is because it's meant for coverage. Work Up would actually work very well in conjunction with Stored Power, allowing it to hit those fighting types, and just general good coverage. Ace for this has been changed into Chinchino. Work Up, Tail Slap, Bullet Seed, and Rock Blast. This will make all of those moves hit 5 times if they hit their accuracy check, and Work Up in general, again, strong move. Bit frail, but it hits incredibly hard and it is very fast. Especially by this point in the game, it can take it decently well, so it isn't too frail. Next, we are going over to Roxie. Poison-type gym leader, and I think naturally to start off with Fungus. Giving it the Effect Spore hidden ability. Foul Play, Protect, Spore, and Ingrain. Reason for this is that Ingrain will just passively allow it to restore health, Protect allows it to recoup even more health, and Foul Play lets it deal out decent damage to things by rebounding their attacks into them. Spore is just a frightening move in general for putting you to sleep. Again, in conjunction with Protect and Ingrain, gives a lot of healing. Coughing, one of our Pokemon from the original team, still keeping the Levitate because it's the only thing it's got. Still keeping Levitate on Coughing because it's the only ability it gets, but giving it Toxic, Protect, Venoshock, and Flamethrower, so that way it can hit those very pesky steel types that are outright immune to its poison, and Protect just lets toxic damage rack up. This time she'll be adding a Quillfish to the team. Waterfall and Scald are super effective against, ground, which is a weakness of the poison typing, one of the few weaknesses of it. And Poison Jab and Minimize are there to deal out some poison damage. Minimize makes it able to avoid hits, allowing poison damage and burn to rack up. Scald's burns, of course, will decrease the attacks of attackers, letting it bulk hits even better. Gengar has been added to the team with a Shadow Ball, Giga Drain, a Sludge Bomb, and Pain Split. Yes, it does get Giga Drain. With Pain Split, it can cut its own HP. With Pain Split, it can cut the HP of what it's facing against, because Gengar doesn't have a typically high HP on its own, and if it's low on health, it can, well, heal itself while dealing a pretty respectable amount of damage. Same applies for Giga Drain, so whichever one is more advantageous to restore health, pretty good. Shadow Ball and Sludge Bomb just do very strong, same type attack bonuses. And her ace will be the Scolipede. Swarm as its ability because it doesn't actually get Speed Boost in this gen, and also Speed Boost is not exactly great on it in this. But with Rock Smash, Steamroller, Poison Jab, and Protect, it actually can deal decently well. Rock Smash is the best thing it really gets for Rock and for Steel types, which, when hitting a super effective attack that has a 50% chance of dropping your physical defense, that damage can rack up pretty quickly. Now over to Burgh. This is where we're going to get pretty jerkish. With Battle Armor Almaldo, this thing is not meant to be a super sweeper, but rather it is meant to set up things such as Stealth Rocks. Many of Burgh's weaknesses are actually weak to Rock. Both Fire and Flying generally don't like taking Stealth Rock damage on switch-in, and with Rock Slide, X Scissor, and Earthquake can deal fairly respectable damage across the board. But its main thing is, of course, setting up those Stealth Rocks for, well, the rest of the team to take advantage of later. Leavanny! Not great, but Swarm Return, X Scissor, and Swords Dance, it's fairly strong when it can get those hits off. Been on the more frail side, but again, this combos very well with the Stealth Rocks punishing Fire and Flying types. Third Pokemon, once again, Leavanny. Same thing, he has two Pokemon, same family as we had have it be a duplicate. Now his real next Pokemon, Scizor. Technician, Bullet Punch, and Bug Bite. It does get Bug Bite in this generation, so it's more powerful than X Scissor. With Swords Dance and Acrobatics. Acrobatics is more powerful than Wing Attack or Aerial Ace, so it's better to go for that. And in general, pretty terrifying. Again, only weak to Fire. So again, Stealth Rocks would punish that, allowing it to do very easy damage across the board. Yanmega was added to this one. Speed Boost, not the greatest, but it is most useful ability it gets. Giga Drain, Acrobatics, Bug Bite, and Ancient Power would allow it to do some pretty solid damage. Not the greatest, but not really meant to be. But then is the real killer app, his Crustle. With Sturdy and Shell Smash, it can become a brutal blitzing behemoth. Easily capable of stacking up some power, not being capable of being one-shot, and then just go for all-out damage with Rock Slide, X Scissor, and Earthquake, covering most everything. Jolting over to Elesa, she's going to be having an Ampharos in this improved team. Static for its ability with Thunderbolt, Thunder Wave, Signal Beam, and Reflect. Ampharos doesn't really have a great moveset, so this was really the best it could do without having to resort to moves such as Focus Miss. Reflect actually pairs extremely well because Electric is only weak to ground, and most ground moves tend to be physical. Though that is completely irrelevant for Emolga. With Discharge and Volt Switch, it can spread some paralysis and easily pivot out, allowing for very good weakness synergy. Acrobatics paired with its flying type is actually quite powerful. Again, it's a very high base power move. When backed up by Stab, it does hit for a lot of damage. And a Tailwind to support the, well, slower members of her team. Electric is typically known for being relatively fast. However, there's a very good number of strong electric types that are very slow. And Tailwind helps support that, as well as the paralysis. Not really helping my case, but it's Zipstrika. Zapzipper is the best ability it actually has, as its other two abilities are only dependent on electric type, which you're not going to want to use against her anyway. Thunderwave, Volt Switch, Overheat, and Double Kick. Doesn't really get a whole lot of moves, but really this is the best it's got. Overheat and Volt Switch will allow it to do some strong burst damage against Grass type, which tend to enjoy going against Electric, as they are generally resisted by it. But Overheat very much punishes that, with Volt Switch allowing it to easily shed those debuffs. In a similar vein, we have Rotom Mow. Leaf Storm allows it to be super effective against ground types. Again, Levitate giving it an immunity to those ground type moves themselves, allowing it to easily come in with Volt Switch pivots. However, this is also when it became Electric Grass. So now its Leaf Storm is far more powerful. Shadow Ball, it does lose stab, but it is a generally neutral hit, and Pain Split allows it to heal itself while dealing damage to opponents when its health is lower. Galvantula is a fantastic all-around Pokemon. Energy Ball, Bug Buzz, Thunderbolt, and Thunder, paired up with Compound Eyes, lets it hit most things for some pretty solid damage. Fortunately, Sticky Webs is not available to it, otherwise it would be on here instead of the redundancy in Thunder and Thunderbolt. But now the real beast of her team, Electros. Thunderbolt, Giga Drain, Flamethrower, and Superpower. Keen-eyed fans will know this set, or at the very least what it is based off of. The very Electros I used myself in Black 2, White 2. And it basically covers everything. It laughs at every single ground type, barring pseudo-legendaries. Speaking of ground types, over to Clay, with his newly added Hippowdon. This was back in the days where Sand, Stream, and Weather lasted the entire battle, rather than being 5 turns as they are today. This is why it also is paired up with Stealth Rock and Earthquake for generally strong damage, and Slack Off and Toxic allow it to stall very well. It's not a damage dealer, but rather it's meant for long-term residual damage and supporting the future allies with its Sandstream ability. Lots of residual damage, especially when the only other 2 typings that don't take damage from sand don't like going up against the ground, that are weak to ground. For the aggressive part of his team, he's got a Crocodile with Intimidate to debuff the physical side of things, Earthquake Crunch, Rock Slide, and a Bulk Up to let it hit a lot of things even harder, and set up on physical attackers that will either be pressured out by Intimidate or won't be able to do enough damage to it. Although it's generally high speed, it can go before many other Pokemon to set up the Bulk Up. While Sandslash does have a bit of a slower stat for speed, it does have Sand Rush, which mitigates this, and with Hone Claws, it can boost its accuracy to allow Stone Edge to hit very reliably, punishing flying types. X-Scissor and Earthquake are just generally good coverage moves and its own very powerful stab, respectively. Mamoswine is, as always, a fantastic Pokemon. Earthquake, Ice Go Crash, Rock Slide, and Superpower with Thick Fat. Really don't need to go into too much detail on this, but we're going to anyway. Thick Fat gives it a functional resistance to Ice, as Ice is a super effective type for ground. It would actually pair very well as a counter to Ice types. Gastrodon is in a bit of a similar vein, though instead of a resistance, it is an immunity to water, punishing water types aiming to go against it, with being, well, able to boost its own special attack anytime it is hit by a water move. Scald, Ice Beam, and Earth Power let it hit things for pretty solid damage, but it is also not much of an attacker. It's meant to be a bit annoying and bulky, with Recover there to give it a little bit of bonus HP. And now for the main member of his team, his ace, Excadrill. Really not much to say about it. It's Earthquake, Iron Head, Rock Slide, and Swords Dance, Sand Rush. It's all around strong. Really not much need to be said. There's a reason why this works well. High speed, high damage, and Excadrill is generally a little more bulky than people will give it credit for. It has a very high HP stat. Going over to Skyla, bit of a similar vein to Clay's lead. Toxic, Stealth Rock, Spikes, and Fly for a Skarmory with Sturdy. Yes, this is evil. This is Jerkish, and it is meant to be. It is not meant to be a damage dealer. It is meant to set up those hazards to chip away at the opposing team throughout the fight. And Toxic with Fly, so that way it doesn't need to be present to be doing residual damage. Next is Gliscor. With Toxic, it can do a bit of the same as what Skarmory was doing, though it has Swords Dance and Earthquake to be very aggressive. Earthquake will hit most of the weaknesses to flying super effective. It's electric, and it hits rock, as well as being outright immune to electric type attacks, allowing for some pretty solid punishing of, well, typical counters. That is really what these teams are meant to be, dealing with counters. Swoobat with Simple is terrifying. Simple turns every boost into a double of what it is normally, meaning Calm Mind would functionally be a Nasty Plot plus Amnesia in a single turn. Pair this up with Charge Beam, there is a 70% chance it gets a free Nasty Plot while dealing damage. Air Slash, good stab, and Giga Drain to heal itself. The reason why it doesn't have a Psychic type stab is that the only thing Psychic would help it with is hitting poison types, of which not really going to be too much of a problem. Having to stick with her original line, we have Swanna here with Keen Eye. Its abilities are not particularly helpful anyway. Endeavor, Scald, Brine, and Ice Beam are, while not the best moves it can get a hold of, they're not fantastic moves. There really isn't much Swano's got in terms of stats or moves that are particularly impressive. This is where one of those things of later generation moves and abilities that were added onto Pokemon would have come in handy. Pelipper doesn't get Drizzle. But speaking of a powerful water flying type, it's Gyarados. Intimidate on its team to allow it to more easily set up Dragon Dance, which will give it a very high speed edge, give it a very big boost to power of Waterfall, and Earthquake to help cover its weaknesses. Bounce to, well, be a good flying stab. It isn't the greatest move, but it does at least have a fairly solid paralysis chance. And again, paired up with Gyarados' naturally bulky stats, as well as good offensive, it's a great all-arounder. And now, her new ace, a multi-scale Dragonite. Very similar to the idea of the Gyarados, multi-scale is instead just a strictly better version of that. Halving all damage it takes, if it is at full health, will give it an extremely easy Dragon Dance setup. Outrage is a brutally powerful move. Both Brick Break and Earthquake will allow it to hit its weaknesses extremely hard, as well as cover the weaknesses of the rest of her team. Keeping with the Dragons, we're heading over to Drayden's team with a Rough Skin Hone Claws Druddigon. This thing is not meant to be a damage dealer, though Hone Claws can allow it to do some damage. It's much more of a rock setter to deal with ice types potentially coming in later. Sort of a counterpunch here. Haxorus with Mold Breaker allows it to break through Pokemon using Sturdy or any damage mitigating ability, with fairly solid setup and fairly good coverages. Again, much like the Dragonite that was on Skyla's team, it's really there to go and it hits stuff pretty hard. Flygon was added to the team. With Superpower and U-Turn, it can hit, say, it can hit Steel or Ice types fairly hard with a Superpower. Though it is debuffing its own stats, it can quickly U-Turn out, cleansing it of those dropped stats. Earthquake and Dragon Claw are also two very strong stabs, Earthquake especially being better, as the only thing Dragon Claw will be used for is hitting other Dragon types. And now it is Flygon, but superior in stats, with Garchomp. Earthquake, Dragon Dance, Brick Break, and Outrage, with Rough Skin. Not much really needs to be said about this. Salamence! Much like the Skyla, Gyarados, Intimidate, allows for easily set up a Dragon Dance, and then Brute Force with its strong coverages. The reason it does not have a flying move is Flying Bolt does not help it too particularly much, and its flying type physical moves are not particularly good. It's kind of the one weakness that both Dragonite and Salamence have always had. And now his new ace is Hydreigon. Roost to give it a little bit of sustain, as it is a very bulky Pokemon normally, and this is before Fairy existed, so it does not have a double weakness. Dragon Pulse, Dark Pulse, and Flamethrower will give it broad spectrum neutral damage and very strong coverage. Swimming over to our final gym with Marlon, we've got Politoed, the only Drizzle setter in the game. Not a very good Pokemon in terms of what it has available to it as a damage dealer. It is a much better doubles kit, but singles, not great. Endeavor, Scald, Ice Beam, and Protect, really only there for Endeavor when its health is low, to cripple what it's going up against, with the Scald and Protect being there to, when it will burn, gradually deal residual chip damage. Ice Beam there for, well, counter coverage, but probably not going to survive a hit too well from that. Caracosta, on the other hand, with rain support, Waterfall becomes brutal. And much like Crustle, Shell Smash Sturdy, allowing it for heavy damage, with counter covering Ice Beam, Stab Rock Slide. Ms. Pringleface, Jellicent, similar with Scald, Shadow Ball, Recover, Ice Beam. It's there to bulk out hits very well, disable moves, and generally be fairly annoying. There's a very good reason this Pokemon is one of the best for the gen. As well as its low offensive stats being a bit compensated by the permanent rain, allowing Scald to be even better. Wailord is not great, but again, have to use it. Bounce, decent coverage, but not a very powerful hit on its own. Water Spout and Scald, when boosted by rain, are really its main things. Similar to what we saw before with Politoed, Protect is there to get some residual damage while the burn is present, and Water Spout is there for just extremely high burst damage when under rain. Azumarill is a bit of an oddity. Typically we see physical Zoom, however this one is special. Zaps it for giving it an immunity to grass, making it a very good switch-in. With Scald, Whirlpool, Ice Beam, and Fake Tears, it is there to be a modified Perish Trapper. Trapping Pokemon with Whirlpool, hitting them with Fake Tears, and then while they are unable to really deal with it, hitting them with special attacks to finish them off. And now is the final member of his team, the Kingdra. Swift Swim, it is blitzingly fast. It does not need to opt for Scald in this case, as it is going for pure force with Brute Force Surf boosted by Rain. Draco Meteor is for a heavy hit, and Dragon Pulse is there for a very strong hit, but not so powerful it destroys its own ability to deal damage. Draco Meteor is much more of a big wall finisher. And then Ice Beam for, well, coverage. So that's what my improvements for the UNOVA Mark II gyms is. If you guys enjoyed, please don't forget to leave a like, subscribe, and comment below what your favorite gym leader improvements were. Do you think this was a bit of a better change compared to what we did back in Kalos gyms? I think these were a bit more tame, and I think that definitely the Kalos gyms were pretty flawed in how I did them. They were way too aggressive. But let us know below what you guys did, and you may have noticed there were some special shiny Pokemon throughout these pictures. Maybe something's gonna happen for those who get them right. If you like what we do here, we've got a lot more stuff on this channel, and gonna be doing some pretty other big projects coming up, one featuring Cynthia, and doing a full odds shiny hunt of Lugia back in Soul Silver, as well as a full playthrough of the game. Hope to see you guys there.